June 6, 1944, Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy. Hauptmann Klaus Bergmann crouched in the stone church tower, scanning the pre-dawn darkness through his binoculars. He had been trained to expect disorganized American conscripts, soft civilians in uniform, who would scatter at the first sign of real combat. What descended from the night sky instead, in those chaotic hours after midnight, would obliterate every assumption the Wehrmacht had made about their enemy. The Americans didn't just land, they came down fighting. And even when scattered across kilometers of hostile territory, separated from their units and hopelessly outnumbered, they attacked. For Hauptmann Bergmann and the 847 German officers who filed action reports from the Normandy sector between June 6 and June 30, 1944, the collision between expectation and reality began the moment American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions touched French soil. Among the German command were 163 veteran officers, men who had fought in Poland, France, and Russia, whose experiences would prove even more psychologically jarring than those of junior officers encountering combat for the first time. According to declassified reports from the Wehrmacht's Army Group B headquarters, preserved in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, Germany, German intelligence had prepared extensive assessments of American airborne capabilities throughout 1943 and early 1944. The 278-page analysis titled Amerikanische Fallschirmjäger, American Paratroopers, Tactical Assessment and Defensive Measures, dedicated 43 pages to anticipated American weaknesses in night operations, unit cohesion, and combat aggression. What actually happened caught the entire German defensive structure off guard. Oberst Friedrich Hoffmann, commanding officer of the 709th Infantry Division's 919th Grenadier Regiment, recorded in his war diary, now housed at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, his first encounter with American paratroopers in the hours after the drop. June 6, 1944, 0247 hours. Reports flooding in of American airborne landings across our entire sector. Expected chaos and confusion among enemy forces. Instead, within 30 minutes of landing, we are receiving accurate mortar fire on our command post. How? They should be disorganized, scattered, gathering their equipment. Instead, they are attacking our positions. This is not the enemy we were briefed to expect. The psychological preparation German officers received before D-Day painted American forces in specific, unambiguous terms. Intelligence summaries circulated throughout Army Group B, translated and cataloged by Allied intelligence teams after the war as SHAEF Document G2/2294, included detailed characterizations of what German commanders should expect from American airborne forces. According to these documents, American paratroopers were technically proficient but lacking in combat spirit, dependent on overwhelming material superiority, and prone to hesitation when isolated from command structures. The assessments emphasized that American forces perform adequately when following detailed plans with strong logistics support, but collapse quickly when plans fail or supply lines are disrupted. Commanders were told that scattered airborne forces would seek to consolidate defensively rather than take offensive action while disorganized. Yet here stood Hauptmann Bergmann, age 34, veteran of the Eastern Front, watching through his binoculars as isolated groups of American paratroopers, some consisting of only 3 or 4 men, systematically attacked German strongpoints throughout Sainte-Mère-Église. The cognitive dissonance wasn't merely tactical surprise, it was a fundamental challenge to German military doctrine about American fighting capabilities. Lieutenant Hans Weber, a platoon commander in the 91st Air Landing Division captured near Carentan on June 8th, described his first engagement with American paratroopers in a prisoner interrogation transcript preserved in the National Archives Record Group 165, Records of the War Department, General and Special Staffs. They came out of the darkness. We had just received reports of scattered American drops, told they would be confused and defensive. Instead, at 03:15 hours, a group of perhaps 8 Americans attacked our position, 27 men in prepared defensive positions. They used fire and maneuver tactics we associate with veteran assault troops. They threw grenades with precision. Their rifle fire was disciplined and accurate. When we repulsed their first assault, they didn't retreat. They repositioned and attacked from a different angle. This continued for 40 minutes until they withdrew in good order. 8 men tied down nearly 30 of ours for close to an hour, in darkness, in unfamiliar territory. I have fought Russians. These Americans fought like Russians, but with better equipment and training. The revelation of American airborne combat capability came in waves, each more psychologically disturbing than the last. According to action reports from the German 352nd Infantry Division, which held positions in the critical area between Utah and Omaha beaches, the initial paratroop drops created tactical chaos far beyond their numbers. Major Ernst Richter, operations officer for the 352nd Division, maintained detailed situation logs that were captured intact at division headquarters and are now archived at the Imperial War Museum in London. His entry from 04:30 hours, June 6th, reads, "Situation utterly confused. American paratroopers reported in at least 16 different locations across division sector. Cannot determine main effort. Each group, regardless of size, is conducting aggressive operations, cutting telephone lines, ambushing reinforcement columns, attacking command posts. Expected American doctrine calls for link-up and consolidation before offensive action. These forces are attacking immediately while still scattered and isolated. Cannot predict their actions because they are not following their own doctrine, or perhaps our intelligence regarding their doctrine was completely wrong." The German military, forged in the crucible of the Eastern Front, where Soviet forces often attacked in massive waves with numerical superiority, had developed specific mental models for how different enemies fought. The British were methodical and careful. The French had been psychologically broken. The Soviets were numerous and willing to accept enormous casualties. Americans, according to intelligence assessments, were materially rich but spiritually weak, good when everything went according to plan, but fragile when confronted with chaos. The reality confronted them with something Wehrmacht doctrine hadn't prepared them for: small unit initiative combined with aggressive offensive action, even under the worst possible circumstances. This wasn't what American forces were supposed to do. Major Heinz Tretner, commanding the 795th Georgian Battalion positioned near Utah Beach, kept operational notes that were later seized and translated by the Allied Document Center. His entry from June 6th, 06:15 hours, reveals the psychological impact of this tactical dissonance. Americans are not behaving as predicted. Intelligence briefings emphasize their dependence on radio communications and centralized command, yet these scattered paratroop elements are operating independently with devastating effectiveness. A group of approximately 12 Americans destroyed 3 of our supply trucks, killed 8 men, and disappeared before we could organize pursuit. They did this without apparent communication with higher headquarters, without knowing the terrain, in darkness. How do forces trained for centralized operations perform so effectively when all centralization has broken down? Either our intelligence is catastrophically wrong, or the Americans have fundamentally changed their tactical doctrine without our knowledge. But the tactical surprises were merely the most visible manifestation of a deeper revelation. Beneath the immediate shock of aggressive small unit tactics lay something more fundamentally challenging to German military assumptions. American forces possessed a level of training, equipment, and individual soldier quality that Wehrmacht intelligence had systematically underestimated. The equipment differential became immediately apparent. According to captured German reports,
compiled in the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, The Effects of Strategic Bombing on German Morale, German soldiers reported that American paratroopers carried superior small arms, better radios, more ammunition, and equipment that functioned reliably under field conditions. Oberst Hoffmann's diary entry from June 7th captured this material revelation. Examined equipment from dead American paratroopers. Each man carried more ammunition than 2 of our soldiers. Their rifles, the M1 Garand, fires semi-automatically with 8-round clips. Our Kar 98K8 requires manual bolt operation for each shot. In close combat, this is devastating advantage. They carry multiple grenades, emergency rations that are actually edible, morphine, medical supplies. One American sergeant had a portable radio that weighed less than our battalion radio set. The material gap is not just about quantity, it is about quality and distribution. They equip every soldier like we equip our elite assault troops. The training differential proved even more psychologically destabilizing. Wehrmacht intelligence had assumed American troops, drawn from a civilian population with no military tradition, would require extensive combat seasoning before performing effectively. The airborne forces demolished this assumption. Hauptmann Bergmann wrote in a letter to his wife, intercepted by French resistance and passed to Allied intelligence, dated June 9th, "I have commanded troops in 3 campaigns. I recognize veteran soldiers when I see them. These American paratroopers, some barely 20 years old, fight with discipline and tactical sophistication I associate with units that have been in combat for years. They move properly under fire. They coordinate fire and maneuver instinctively. When we killed their lieutenant, the sergeant immediately assumed command and continued the attack without pause. This is not raw conscript behavior. This is the result of systematic, intensive training that has created veteran-quality soldiers without combat experience. I did not know this was possible."
The reports from German officers consistently noted specific tactical capabilities that contradicted intelligence assessments. American paratroopers demonstrated proficiency in night combat operations, a skill that required extensive training and experience. They showed remarkable ability to improvise and adapt when isolated from their parent units. They fought aggressively, even when outnumbered and surrounded. Lieutenant Weber, in his interrogation, provided a detailed comparison. "I fought for 2 years on the Eastern Front. Soviet soldiers were brave and numerous, but their tactics were often crude, human wave attacks, predictable patterns. These Americans in Normandy, they used terrain skillfully, suppressed our positions with accurate fire while maneuvering, and withdrew when the tactical situation turned against them rather than fighting to pointless death. This is sophisticated infantry tactics. We were told Americans could not match German tactical proficiency. This assessment is dangerously wrong." The systematic demolition of German intelligence assumptions extended beyond tactics and equipment. The psychological profile of American soldiers, portrayed as soft, comfort-dependent, and lacking in martial spirit, proved equally inaccurate when tested by the chaos of the Normandy drop. According to post-battle analyses compiled by the Wehrmacht's intelligence branch and captured at Oberkommando der Wehrmacht headquarters, German commanders reported consistent patterns of American behavior that violated expected psychological profiles. American paratroopers continued fighting when wounded. They refused surrender opportunities even when surrounded. They showed initiative and aggression rather than defensive caution when isolated. Major Richter's situation log from June 8th documents a specific incident that exemplified this psychological revelation. American paratrooper, isolated from this unit, engaged our patrol of 7 men. He was alone, 7 against 1. He killed 2, wounded 1, and escaped in the confusion. Wehrmacht regulations would dictate surrender in such situations. American training apparently does not. This suggests either fanaticism, unlikely given their material culture, or genuine fighting spirit we did not expect them to possess. The cumulative weight of these revelations, tactical, material, training, and psychological, created a crisis within German officer corps throughout the Normandy sector. The comfortable assumptions that had sustained German confidence faced systematic demolition through direct combat experience. And this was only the beginning.
the full scope of what these American paratroopers represented and what their presence meant for the war's outcome would become clearer in the brutal days ahead. June 18, 1944. Wehrmacht Field Hospital, 12 kilometers south of Carentan. Hauptmann Klaus Bergmann lay on a blood-stained cot, his left arm shattered by American rifle fire during the defense of a hedgerow position 3 days earlier. Through the canvas tent walls, he could hear the distant thunder of American artillery, relentless, precise, never-ending. 12 days after the invasion, the revelation that had begun with the paratroop drops had metastasized into something far more terrifying, the realization that Germany was fighting an enemy it had fundamentally misunderstood. The transformation of German officer assessments wasn't gradual, it was catastrophic. According to captured Wehrmacht situation reports preserved at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, the tone of German intelligence evaluations shifted dramatically between June 6 and June 20, 1944. Early reports questioned specific tactical predictions. Later reports questioned everything. Oberst Friedrich Hoffmann, whose war diary had documented the first shocking encounters, wrote on June 15th, in an entry that would be his last. He was killed by American artillery fire the following day. "We are not fighting the enemy we prepared for. Every assumption proves false. American logistics function flawlessly despite our interdiction efforts. Their artillery is more responsive than ours. Their air supremacy is absolute. Most critically, their soldiers, not just the paratroopers now, but regular infantry, fight with competence and determination that matches or exceeds our own. We told ourselves we were the superior fighting force, held back only by material disadvantage. Normandy proves we were wrong about the material gap and our supposed superiority." The psychological impact rippled through the German command structure. Officers who had fought confidently in Poland, France, and Russia found themselves confronting an opponent whose capabilities shattered their professional military judgment. The crisis wasn't merely tactical, it was epistemological. If their assessments of American forces had been so catastrophically wrong, what else had they misunderstood? Major Richter, the operations officer whose situation logs had documented the chaos of the first days, was captured by American forces on June 14th near Saint-Lô. His interrogation transcript, preserved in the Military Intelligence Archives at Fort Holabird, Maryland, reveals a man whose worldview had collapsed. "I have served in the Wehrmacht for 12 years. I believed in German military superiority as a proven fact, demonstrated in campaign after campaign. Normandy has destroyed this belief. The Americans are not lucky. They are not winning through material advantage alone. They are professionally competent, tactically sound, and strategically coherent. Their junior officers make decisions our junior officers would never be permitted to make. This decentralized command structure, which we were told would create chaos, instead creates flexibility and initiative we cannot match. I do not know how we can defeat such an enemy." The material revelations that had shocked German forces in the first days became overwhelming as the battle progressed. American supply operations continued with mechanical efficiency despite German efforts to disrupt them. Captured logistics documents showed supply schedules maintained with precision that Wehrmacht quartermasters could only dream of achieving. Lieutenant Hans Weber, the platoon commander captured near Carentan, witnessed American logistics operations during his transport to a rear area POW collection point. His observations, recorded by intelligence officers on June 16th, captured the sheer scale of American material superiority. "We marched past American supply dumps for 3 kilometers, 3 kilometers of stacked supplies, ammunition, food, fuel, medical supplies, replacement equipment, all organized, cataloged, guarded. I have never seen such abundance. The Americans supply their frontline troops better than we supply our headquarters staff. One supply sergeant told me through an interpreter that this was normal, that every division received such support. If this is true, we cannot win through attrition. They can replace losses faster than we can inflict them." But the most psychologically devastating revelation wasn't material or tactical. It was the growing awareness among German officers that they had been systematically lied to by their own intelligence services and, by extension, by the Nazi regime itself. The propaganda that had sustained German confidence, that Americans were racially inferior, culturally decadent, militarily incompetent, collided violently with the reality of skilled, determined, well-led American forces grinding through Norman hedgerows. For officers who had believed in National Socialist ideology, this collision created profound cognitive dissonance. For those who had privately doubted the ideology, it confirmed their worst fears about the regime's dishonesty. Hauptmann Bergmann, recovering in the field hospital, wrote a final letter to his wife on June 20th. The letter was found on his body after American forces overran the hospital 2 days later. It is now preserved at the U.S. Army Military History Institute. Margaretha, I must tell you truths I can barely admit to myself. We have been lied to. About the Americans, about our capabilities, perhaps about everything. The enemy we face is not the enemy we were told to expect. They are competent, well-equipped, and possess fighting spirit equal to our own. If our intelligence was so wrong about this, what else have they been wrong about? What else has the regime lied about? I have served faithfully for 10 years, believed in our cause, trusted our leaders. Normandy has shattered this faith. We cannot win this war. Perhaps we never could. I fear what this means for Germany, for you, for our children. The Americans will win not through luck or numbers alone, but because they are simply better than we were told, and we are not as superior as we believed. The letters, diaries, and interrogation transcripts from German officers in Normandy reveal a consistent pattern. Initial shock gave way to grudging respect, which then transformed into a deeper crisis of confidence, not just in German military capability, but in the entire ideological framework that had sustained the Wehrmacht. According to a statistical analysis prepared by Allied intelligence in August 1944, based on captured German documents and prisoner interrogation, approximately 73% of German officers captured in Normandy between June 6 and July 31 expressed some form of disillusionment with pre-invasion intelligence assessments. Of these, 41% went further, questioning broader aspects of Nazi ideology regarding racial and cultural superiority. Major Heinz Tretner, the battalion commander whose operational notes had documented the early tactical confusion, was captured on June 23. His interrogation revealed the depth of his disillusionment. I joined the Wehrmacht in 1935, believed in the restoration of German military power, trusted that our cause was just and our victory inevitable. Normandy has taught me that belief unsupported by reality is merely delusion. The Americans have defeated us not through some trick or temporary advantage, but through superior training, logistics, leadership, and fighting spirit. We told ourselves comfortable lies about enemy weakness to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about our own limitations. A military force built on lies cannot ultimately defeat one built on competence and truth. The revelation created practical consequences beyond psychological crisis. German tactical doctrine, built on assumptions of qualitative superiority that would offset material disadvantage, proved inadequate when the enemy possessed both material advantage and comparable quality. Commanders trained to expect enemy mistakes and collapse found themselves facing opponents who rarely made critical errors and never broke under pressure. By late June, Wehrmacht units throughout the Normandy sector were fighting defensively, abandoning offensive operations except for limited counterattacks. The aggressive, confident Wehrmacht that had conquered most of Europe was being methodically ground down by an enemy they had underestimated catastrophically. Hauptmann Bergmann died on June 22 when American artillery struck the field hospital. He was 34 years old, had served in 4 campaigns, and believed until Normandy that German victory was inevitable. His final diary entry written the morning of his death contained a single sentence: "We trained to fight the enemy we wanted them to be, not the enemy they actually were."
The 847 German officers who filed action reports from Normandy in June 1944 had witnessed the systematic demolition of every comfortable assumption they held about their enemy. The Americans weren't soft, they weren't incompetent, they weren't lacking in fighting spirit. They were, in almost every measurable category, equal or superior to the Wehrmacht forces defending France. Of those 847 officers, 312 were killed in action by the end of July. 198 were captured. 94 were wounded and evacuated. The remaining 243 continued fighting, carrying with them the terrible knowledge that Germany faced an opponent it could not defeat, not because of some temporary setback or bad luck,
but because the fundamental premises upon which German strategy rested were false. The paratroopers who had descended from the night sky on June 6th hadn't just seized bridges and crossroads. They had shattered the psychological foundation of German military confidence. The revelation they triggered, that America possessed not just material superiority, but tactical competence, strategic coherence, and individual soldier quality equal to Germany's best, would ripple through the Wehrmacht for the remainder of the war. Lieutenant Colonel James Gavin, commander of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, wrote in his post-war memoir, On to Berlin, about encountering captured German officers in late June. What surprised me most wasn't their tactical competence or fighting spirit. I expected that. What surprised me was their shock at our capabilities. They had genuinely believed we would be easy to defeat. When that belief collapsed in the first hours of combat, it took their confidence with it. We didn't just defeat them militarily, we defeated the ideology that told them they were unbeatable. The German officers who survived Normandy carried their revelation back to a Germany that still believed in inevitable victory, that still trusted the regime's assurances, that still accepted comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. They had learned, through blood and terror and the systematic destruction of their professional confidence, that propaganda cannot withstand contact with reality. The Americans had defeated them twice, once on the battlefield and once in the deeper realm of belief and assumption. The second defeat proved more devastating than the first because it destroyed not just bodies and equipment, but the psychological foundation that sustained the will to fight. That proved to be the most powerful weapon of all.